The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Woldu. We've got a great show for you, jam-packed. Of course, we have two gentlemen here that are going to help me get through all these topics. Of course, my good friend, co-host Andrew Brethauer. How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. I'm back finally.
Yeah, after a week hiatus.
On and off,
to
on
rest,
and off.
Some R&R.
If you want to call it that. More responsibility, I'd probably be R, but...
Well, one of the sports editors for the Lloydminster Source. Of course, you've been taking on a bigger role with the company as well. Thank you for joining me this week. And we're pleased to be joined by Darren Pawsey, who's the offensive coordinator for the Lloyd Comp Barons. Things didn't go your way necessarily, but there is a silver lining. You have provincials coming up in about 2 weeks' time. And, of course, what can you say about your team? And a great year for you from last season, having a brand new coach that helped out, guide the team to at least a field goal within winning it, and then to having another good, successful year this season. Glad to have you on, Darren Pawsey.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been good. You know, like we've had a good season. I know there's been some games that were somewhat lopsided in the score, and we've had some close ones with Holy Rosary, and we let a couple get away from us, and that just kind of changed the way that the league was going to play out. But we had a tough game on Friday night against Holy. Everybody was leaving it all out in the field. Lots of guys are pretty sore this week, so we're recovering. And we got a couple weeks to get back at it and be ready for Fort McMurray on the 7th of November. So. All
right, and you're hosting that and another potential game against an Edmonton club right after that. So it's going to be a good, fantastic time. There's still plenty of football, and of course the snow will be falling around that time. But before we get to football, before we get to those chilly temperatures, let's talk about a team that heated up and then eventually cooled off, albeit some people might find it not the right way, but the Toronto Blue Jays. They're a team that really, really took the hearts of Canadian fans out here, kind of rejuvenated, I guess, baseball in a sense, north of the 49th. We're within 2 games of actually making it to the World Series, and a couple plays that could have gone either way. Now we fast forward, they're in the off season. There's still question marks. Their GM will be out of his contract by October 31st. You also have players like Estrada. You have players like Price, pitchers that were very good for your club that are free agents. And you also have a $12 million option on R.A. Dickey. What is next for this Blue Jay club? And will we see guys like David Price, Marco Estrada, and perhaps R.A. Dickey return to the Jays?
I think so. I think if I'm the new president, and I believe it's the guy that came from Cleveland, correct? Shapiro?
Yeah.
I think that the first guy that I'm going to sign is the GM, because I think he orchestrated the whole thing back in last year and had everything set up for them to get to where they got to. I can see them definitely keeping Estrada. I'm not so sure about Dickey. I mean,
he has an option. Maybe he takes a reduced role, reduced pay.
Maybe. I heard that they have $1 million buyout on him, and then his option is 12, right? So, it may come down to the economics of this thing, and as to whether they sign Price or not. You got to look at what Price did for him at the end of the season, and got him where they were. Is he worth what they are estimating $50 million contract? I don't know, but I think that there's going to be some pretty interesting things happen in the Blue Jays organization in the next couple of weeks.
So you said what, $14 million for Dickey?
We're getting an option about 12 and a half if they pick it up. But if they could get him, maybe he wants to reduce role. I think he's one of those guys who might do it. But you also got to remember, they got $20 million freed if they don't pick up Mark Burley.
Right.
So that's cash you could put towards David Price,
speculation he's going to retire.
Yes.
Yeah. And see, what's the big thing we're talking about? We're talking about money.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. I don't care who they re-sign or what they do with, they got on sign and Thopless, they got to do all that. It's what money Rogers is going to start throwing in this team, because you've seen it this year. They put money in the team. Now you get players, you get big name players, you get players you can play and get yourselves to 2 games out of the World Series. So if you're going to close that down and say we're not going to spend the money anymore, it doesn't matter who you bring back because you can't afford them. You can't are you going to pay Price $50 million? It doesn't matter if Rogers isn't actually going to open up the bank to pay them. Doesn't matter if you can pick up Dickey because you don't have the money for that. So until Rogers decides, yep, here's the bank, go nuts, we can afford it, it really doesn't matter in Toronto who they bring in.
And with all the cell phone and you look at the cable subscriptions, I think they could shell out a few more dollars and keep that team intact, because they are at least a piece, maybe two away from actually winning the entire thing.
And
Right,
it more showed just how much this entire country got behind this team just by having a good team on the field. It's not like a city. I hated it because I just got tired of the bandwagon, but they probably loved it. And across this country, everyone was having Blue Jays fever, and everyone was buying apparel, and everyone was involved in going to games and trying to find tickets from here to fly to Toronto to watch games or go to Texas, and everyone got involved in that.
It was amazing how many people, even from Lloydminster, flew to Toronto to watch the Blue Jays play, whether it was the last playoff or the last league games or some playoff games.
Or down the stretch.
Or they went down the stretch. Tons of people were in Texas and Kansas City from all over Canada because they couldn't get to Toronto or they couldn't get tickets to go to Toronto, so they bought them when they went to their visiting parks.
And somehow it seemed cheaper, didn't it?
I doubt it. Not with the exchange rate, it wouldn't have been.
That's fair. Hey, let's move on now to a different topic. I want to talk about the Wheatland Football League final has been set. I know it might be a little bit of salt in the wounds for you, so I'm going to start off with Andrew. What do you make of this? You have the St. Paul Lions taking on the Raiders. They only had one lone meeting earlier this season in St. Paul, and the Raiders, would you safe to say, crushed them in St. Paul, or at least had a comfortable win in essence? Now you look at it, the Raiders are a bit banged up, but how do you see this one playing out this time around in the final?
I think the same way we've seen it for the last 19 games straight with the Raiders. They're going to win. I think they have to do something horribly wrong to lose a football game, I think, at this point. Or the other team has to do something even horribly more wrong to give them the football game. And that's what's come down to for them. They're such a powerful team on offense, on defense. There's really, I don't find by watching them that there's any area that they're actually terrible in that you could point out and say, we're going to take advantage of that, and that's what's going to win us a football game. He's going to disagree with me.
And that's why we have him
This
here.
is why I'm the media.
Yeah, exactly. Darren, well, because you faced this offense, you faced this team twice, back to back.
Yeah.
So you get a good understanding. Can you tell us and describe how is it to play the Raiders, and what does St. Paul even have to do to become successful?
St. Paul has to throw the ball to be successful against the Raiders, for sure. I guess if there's a weakness with the Holy Rosary, I would say it's definitely at their cornerback position. That's why I'm saying St. Paul's got to throw the ball. I think Holy's defense will shut down their run. They did before. Granted, they were down a point at halftime, but they changed in the third quarter and totally turned momentum against St. Paul. But if St. Paul can't pass the ball, which they haven't against us very much, and they definitely didn't do it against the Raiders the first game, I don't think that they're going to be successful. I think the Raiders, and Andrew's right, their offense is high-powered. You have to cover not only one or two guys, but they've got three or four, and it's passing and running. It's balanced.
And they're interchangeable, it seems.
They're interchangeable. I mean, don't forget, these kids all came out of our minor programs, so a lot of them I coached in Mustangs, Red Dogs, summer games. Even one of them went with me to Texas last winter. So a lot of these guys we're fairly familiar with, and I think they've got a good shot at winning. It's just going to come down to them executing the plays that they have, and they did that well on Friday against us. They shut down our running game for the most part, other than a couple plays. So we were passing the ball and we were doing short passes, and that got us with some momentum at the end of the game, but we were kind of running out of time, so it didn't turn out the way we hoped. But I think that Holy Rosary will probably win this one, yeah.
All right, we're going to turn our attention now to hockey. And the idea of 3-on-3 was passed after the GM meetings earlier in the summer, saying, you know what, we want to reduce shootouts. Well, so far, they've played 25 games. 16 of them have been decided by 3-on-3. But there's one player in particular who doesn't like it, and we'll go to a quick clip right now.
It's terrible. It's a terrible part of hockey. It's not hockey. It ain't hockey. Let's just let the kids play. It's stupid.
That is Dustin Byfuglien, a defenseman of the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, his team earlier the week lost in overtime to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay ended up losing the night later to Chicago and Jonathan Toews, and he backed that up again, Toews that is, with another overtime goal. I see this, I can understand Byfuglien's point, and we'll begin with you, Darren. Do you see the same thing, that it just seems too gimmicky going 3-on-3 after you went 4-on-4 for so many years?
You know what? I kind of agree with Bufflin. I'm an old school guy, and I like the 5-on-5 sudden death overtime. The game is the same as it's been for the previous 3 periods, other than sudden death. I know there was some controversy when they changed to 4-on-4. Some people didn't like that, felt it was maybe too much, too wide open or whatever. I'm not a big fan of 3-on-3, to be honest with you.
Even though, and I agree with that, but even though you look at the statistics, 25 games, 16 of them have been decided in overtime. That's got to be a plus, right? In some way.
Well, considering they want to get everyone's
They want to get rid of
complaining about, they want to
shootouts.
get rid of the shootout. So
Right.
you're in a catch-22. You didn't have a lot when you're playing 4-on-4, but now you do have overtime being solved with 3-on-3. So what do? Bring back the tie. That's getting to the point where the NHL brought this in because they needed more goals, they wanted more scoring, they wanted to give fans something. I think we're beyond that. We're beyond that point where they have to market and sell the game to try and get people to come in and watch. Let a game end in a tie. And you know what? Is it going to happen? Yeah, it is. But as we've kind of mentioned, now, do we go 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 for that, guards? I don't care. But bring back the tie and, maybe you're solve these problems. It was a marketing plan the first time.
Right.
It's no longer needed in this day and age NHL.
If
All
they
right.
bring back the tie,
Really
they
quick.
could leave it at 5. Go 5-on-5 sudden death, and if it doesn't happen, then it's a tie. Leave
You
it
know
at
what?
tie.
Why don't we just roll the dice or flip a coin and see how that goes for teams? We're going to take a commercial break, and we're going to return with more Gloves Are Off and talk about the red hot Canadiens.